Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. Hope everyone is doing well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. If you're watching live or if you're watching later, please put the salam in the chat or in the comments, and also continue to mention where you are watching from, as that is very appreciated. Like, shares, comments, subscribes, all that type of stuff is all very appreciated and necessary. I appreciate everyone who has been along with this course. The videos, the previous ones, continue to keep getting views. I appreciate that people have been sharing it. Continue to share it. As I said, they're longer videos. They're more educational than they are entertaining. The only way that people will get this learning is by you sharing it. You need you to actively share it in order for people to get that. Go to abrahameducation.com/parents. Please sign up for my email list that I have a button for you to sign up for there. You can also on that site book a meeting with me if there is something that you want to talk about, and there is no charge for that. Also, to follow me on Instagram. This is something I've been forgetting to say, but if you go to Instagram, my Instagram is Abraham_education. That's another way that you can communicate with me. I keep my Instagram story pretty updated. A lot of times I have a question box in there. So that's another way that you can get more material, more content from me, and continue to interact. So today is a little different because of Eid, and I know some of us were still celebrating Eid. Sorry, here on the third day after it's here in this. I know Eid for some places, Eid was yesterday. Others, it was Saturday. Where I am in Minnesota, it was on Saturday. So I hope everyone had a joyous and celebratory Eid, good time with the family, all that good stuff. I know sometimes the kids on Eid or on exciting days, they can, you get with the excitement also comes a downturn. So there's some points, sometimes the kids have tantrums and frustration and all that type of stuff comes later. So just stay cool with that. I hope when we're having the fun time, when we're having the Eid parties wherever they are, and they have the bouncy castles or whatever, try to be a little more active in supervising them. Not that you got to control every little bit of their interaction with one another, but I don't like just seeing that passed off onto the teenagers. That's what I see a lot of times at the Eid parties. Have the bouncy castles all set up or whatever, the fun time, whatever. Of course, the brothers are sitting somewhere, the sisters are sitting somewhere, the adults are socializing. Of course, the adults need to enjoy it too. Nothing wrong with that. And we select some of the teenagers, older brothers, sisters, go watch the kids at the castle or whatever, I don't like that. The teenagers, they're not very skilled in managing the kids. They actually will usually be rough and impulsive and all that type of thing. And then the kids will learn that from them, and it'll become like a cycle. And as I was talking about last time, when the kids are having fun, they're learning, that's a context in which they will learn a lot. They're very, very attached. Kids are very attached to the times when they have fun. Fun is very important to kids. So, if we don't have a sense of what is going on when they're having fun, we sabotage ourselves in being able to take advantage of those as learning opportunities. We can't really reflect on them later because we don't have any further idea beyond what they tell us of what was going on. There can also be some things with not supervising the kids that really incentivizes for bad habits. A lot of times when we're not supervising kids while they play, and we don't intervene until something like big is going on, or things have gotten so loud or a fight going on so big that then we got to get over there. And then sometimes when that happens, it's the kid who lies who ends up winning. So kids are fighting over whose ball it is or whatever. And you go over there, you don't have any idea what happened. And it's the kid who lies who gets away with it. And then that kid learns from it. Actually, both kids will learn in that situation that, lying gets me something. So again, we want to supervise the kids. You don't have to manage every little detail of it, but you want to increase your supervision of the kids when they're playing at least a little bit, at least to the extent that you have some idea of what is going on with them so you can reflect on it later. Okay, we're only going to we won't go more than an hour today. It's Monday. I have lots of things to do. And we'll be back at this on Saturday as well. But we're going to be transitioning today to learning about how kids learn. Specifically, I'm going to talk today about the skill and what you need to understand about getting kids to talk more about their day at school, say at the dinner table. Then we'll also get into how you get them to perform tasks and chores around the house in the next session, which is important. Now, I know, well, like with what we were looking at before, the nonverbal stuff leading up to the tense situations and getting kid in a situation where you can talk about the tense situation with them. I know there's things to unpack with that as far as what you say to kids, and we will revisit that. But the reason I want to go in this direction right now is because before revisiting what we say to kids in that context, I want us to understand some key things about how young people and really about how anybody learns, key things that I've learned as a teacher in my time. Because when you have that foundation of understanding, all these situations will operate a lot better. Now, first, we'll do a little review. I'm going to do the review a little bit differently this time, and then we'll go into the lesson. So for the review, we're going to watch this video. This is a parent coach on TikTok. There's a lot of these people. There's a lot of different types of coaches of everything and all experts and all this type of stuff on TikTok, especially, which is kind of, it's kind of funny. I mean, in one aspect, people doing that stuff online, like the more followers they get, I mean, that can be an indication of credit to them that people are buying into what they say and they like it. So I appreciate that competitive aspect of it. But also on TikTok, like I think a lot of the people have gone viral on TikTok by just using these viral sounds or whatever, this type of thing. And there's a lot of people with a lot of followership on that platform that are teaching a lot of CRAP. And that's something that we need to be aware about with our kids. Anyway, this parenting coach, her handle is Brat Busters Parenting, something like this. Yeah, Brat Busters Parenting. So she's really like this high accountability type parent coach, which is cool and everything. And she teaches some decent things. But I just want to play what she's saying here. Some people have asked me about early childhood, and she's answering the question here about what to do with toddlers who don't listen. And, as we get into learning and understanding how kids learn, even though this is part of review, you do want to start by kind of understanding it from the earliest ages. And because a big mistake that people make with learning is not being able to connect to how a child's mind is thinking. And they've gotten too disconnected to that with their adult advanced mind. And when it comes to things like expectations and like the kids' respect for you, it does begin like when they're toddlers. When they're toddlers, that is when they first get that ability to start testing boundaries and challenges and all that stuff. So like with what we looked at last time, with sticking to expectations and all that type of thing. And, you saw me in the class not continuing with what I was talking about, allowing myself to be interrupted, all that type of stuff as a way of adhering to boundaries no matter what. And that's a way that you don't let things get out of control. When a kid does something that you don't want them to do and you just let it go, you're teaching them that it's okay for them to do what you don't want them to do. And they'll first start testing these boundaries when they're toddlers. But anyway, I want us to watch this. We're going to listen to what she says and answer this question and think about what is the good and what is the bad of what she says. Or what is the good? What could be different? What could we refine from it based on what we've learned?
How to handle toddlers who don't listen. This one comes up quite frequently. So the reason they're not listening is because they know you're not a calm leader. They know that you're not going to do anything about it, or that you don't know what you're doing, or they think they can get away with it. That's what that says to me. So if they don't respect you, they're not going to listen to you, right? So here's what I would do. Let's say I said to a toddler, okay, bring that over here. And they just keep playing with it. And I would just stand up instantly and I'd go over there and I'd take it away. I just would. I'd always follow up a request with a quick action if they ignore me. They will soon learn. I don't care if we get in a tug of war. I'm going to win because I'm the leader. I'm the parent. I want to teach them how to be nice and polite and respectful. And that's how you do it. You follow up an ignored request with a quick action. They will soon learn to listen to you.
Okay, so what is the good? What is the bad of what she's saying? Now, first of all, the good is you want accountability in the situation. She says you want to follow up an ignored request with a quick action. What I don't like about this one as much, and she mentions the calmness, and she mentions being a calm leader, and that is absolutely spot on. You do want of course, I've talked a lot about calmness, and you want your kids to think of you as a leader, and this is part of the way that you develop it with them. What I don't like about this so much is it has a very punitive approach to the way she's thinking about things, and only thinking about it in carrot and stick type of way, where, if the kid has a wrong action, you have to immediately get to the consequence. Now, when kids are defiant, you do want them to experience consequences. However, there's a more incremental way to think about this. Now, especially with what we've learned. She talked about, if the kid's over there and he says, and I tell him to give me the toy or whatever, and he doesn't listen, I'm just going to get up right away, go over there and take it from him. Now, a couple of things about this that are not realized here. Number one, physical proximity. If a young person is occupied with something, either they're playing with something or they are talking to one another or something like this, a good general rule to follow: if you are not within the amount of feet that their age is, do not expect that they are going to hear and register whatever you are saying, because their environmental awareness is limited. They're much more, as a young person, they're much more self-centered than you are as an older person, in a very, very literal way. Teaching high schoolers how I can be sitting at the front of the class, the kids will be working on something, there'll be kids having a conversation, they're just 15 feet away from me in the front row, and they think like I can't hear the conversation. And I might say something to them that like interjects and shows that I'm like I'm responding to what they say. And they'll be like, "Oh, mister, you could hear that type of thing." I'm amazed by that. When I taught fourth grade, you'd see that in an even more dramatic way. With a 2-year-old, a 2-year-old can easily be on the other side of the room, occupied with something. And if you, again, physical proximity is always better than the verbal across the room. If you're saying something, they're easily not going to hear it. The other thing, what did we learn that could be done here instead, or needs to be considered with what she's saying? What did we learn before? We learned the slow turn and the slow approach. And also, if you look at abrahameducation.com/parents, I have an unlisted video on there about how to do a slow get up from the chair. And if you join the mailing list that you can get to on that site, you'll get more unlisted videos. That's, a thing about the slow approach too, is it tests the level at which the kid's defiance is actually at. Because, assuming that they're being defiant when you're telling them to give you a toy when they're across the room, you might be assuming defiance when it's not actually there. And what you want to do is have a system of nonverbal cues in place that allows them to have various points of response, because that is going to give you a more accurate barometer of where their defiance actually is and how big of a level it's actually at. So you could say something to the kid, you can say, "Give me the toy," but if they don't listen, then you do the slow get up and you do the slow walk, and they will pick up on that. And in being able to pick up on that, and they get the sense of seriousness from it, you more often than not, you will see them comply with it. And then you don't have to waste your voice. You don't have to waste what is going to make parents afraid of doing what she said there is, if you just walk over there and take it, you risk the kid having a fit, and you risk sending the message to the kid that interacting with me and interacting my commands upon you is going to put you in a state where you're going to cause a fit. So this whole system that we went over in the previous lessons of nonverbal cueing, with the approach and with the voice and all that type of stuff, it's very important to give you an accurate barometer. I mean, for a lot of reasons, it saves you stress, but it gives you an accurate barometer of where kids' defiance levels actually are. So if you're new watching this, we're on part 5 here of the parenting course, make sure you go to the playlist on my YouTube channel. Go to abrahameducation.com/parents to access it easily, or just go to the YouTube channel. Make sure you watch the previous lessons of the course too, so you can learn that stuff. It's very important. Bismillah. Now, getting in today, how to get kids to talk. A couple of hadith I want to share before we get into this. Bismillah. Prophet. Okay, the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, peace be upon him. Abu Hurairah narrated that the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, said, "Take only as much as you can do of good deeds, for the best of deeds is that which is done consistently, even if it's done a little." Inshallah, I think most of us have heard this before. I tell people this hadith, it's like every self-help book or how to be successful book, wrapped up into 2 lines. And, consistency when it comes to getting our kids to interact with us in a proactive way, in a healthy way, there's nothing that replaces consistency. And something that we need to have in our structure with kids, interacting with kids, is consistent times where we gather the family together, where we come together for a purpose, and interaction is a part of it. Now, obviously, Salah is a time to gather the kids and the most important thing together. And you do the dhikr afterwards, you can interact after that. But other things, definitely, dinner time is something that should be daily and should be really held on to. Reading time, especially when they are young, is something that you should have daily. Before going to bed is a really good time for that. How young can you start reading with a child? How young does a child, what's the earliest age that you can start reading a book to a child at the nighttime? Like 2 months, 3 months. As soon as the child can sit in your lap, you want them to you can read to them. They don't need to understand what you're reading totally. They will start learning about reading from that. They will form positive neurological connections with reading by associating having a book in front of them and being read to with the positive feeling they get from the physical warmth of their body. They also get that physical warmth when they are feeding. Of course, breastfeeding with the mother, feeding from a bottle, which can be done with the father also. As they get older, they move beyond that. That same type of comfort should transfer to a healthy dinner time every day, where you go through the experience of having hunger satiated, which is a positive feeling from people. And when the family is doing these things together, especially in a consistent way, it adds to this overall warmth being brought into the family. Now, interaction with these kids, the big area, there's lots of things that disconnect parents from interacting with their kids. Busyness is the main thing. When kids get older, sometimes you'll experience long gaps of times where the kids are so occupied with their school and their activities and their screens, and you're so occupied with your work and that type of stuff that you can go long times without really interacting with them. That's really especially more likely to happen if you didn't condition them from a young age to making interacting with you a habit, and especially at dinner. And when you have that general interaction at dinner, it can complement deeper interaction as well when you're with kids on an individual level, going on a walk with them, driving the car with them, something like that. Bismillah. Another hadith to share as we're transitioning to understanding how kids learn. And this is like anything else with Islam, where or it's like anything else we learn, where Islam has the principles and guidance that we need with it. Abu Abdurrahman reported the companions would learn to recite 10 verses, meaning 10 verses from the Quran, from the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him. They would not take another 10 verses until they understood the knowledge and deeds they contained. They would say, we learn sacred knowledge and action together. Incremental learning. All learning happens in a very incremental fashion. The biggest mistakes that people make with learning, especially teaching kids, they try to get them doing too high a level of a thing too quickly, and they are not patient enough in the beginning of learning. Something I always tell teachers that I coach that is absolutely true with learning. You have to go slow in order to go fast with any type of learning. When you set out to teach a kid about something, you have to start with the tiniest bits possible, really get them to master that and get confident with that before you move on to the next thing. The process of learning the Quran, which people know, actually does this very well. If you look at the books that teach how to decode Arabic phonetics, they're aligned beautifully in a very logical sequence where if you learn part one and then you learn part two, you're complemented to learn part three. And you learn them bit by bit, and it increases gradually in complexity before you even get to the Quran. And then even memorizing the Quran works that way, where you start with the shorter surahs and going to the longer ones. This is how, learning is like this. I tell people it's like this. It starts small and it builds up incrementally. And, knowing how to teach kids, knowing how to get kids to talk with you at deeper levels and this type of thing, and building them up and teaching them lessons. It's less tactical than all that nonverbal stuff that we were learning before. What I mean, there is tactics involved with it, but it's less precise in that you can do this. Like with the nonverbal stuff, you can know, okay, if you're interrupted, you pause, you breathe. There's a very direct process to it. Teaching kids and building them up, there can be procedural aspects to it, but it is really more a mentality that you have to develop more than anything. And that mentality is rooted in understanding how kids learn and how you build them up and how they develop. And this incremental type of learning, where you master one thing, go on to the next, and you build up slow with consistency over time. This is Islamic learning. This is what Islam gives us. So if we imagine talking to a kid at the dinner table, this is a skill that every parent needs to know how to do and how to develop. Getting kids getting kids to talk at the dinner table. A lot of people get caught up with it. This is what we're going to go over today. Okay. Now, to understand how to get a kid to talk at the dinner table and how to get them to talk generally, you have to understand that the human mind has a continuum of the way it understands things. On one end of that continuum is things that are concrete. On the other end of that continuum are things that are abstract. What does concrete mean? Something that is concrete is something that you can experience with your five senses. What does abstract mean? Abstract means something that only exists within the realm of human ideas. So what is an example of something concrete? A book. It's a very good book, by the way. Yardsticks by Chipwood. A book. That's something concrete. I can touch it. I can see it. I can experience it. Water. Something concrete. I can see it. I can taste it. Experience it with my five senses. What is something that is abstract? What is something that is abstract? Patriotism. That is an abstract concept. Maybe there's parts of it you can see here, there, or whatever, but the idea itself, it is something abstract. A lot of learning that kids do in school, most academic learning, is learning abstract things. A lot of the deeper things that we want kids to learn are abstract things. So when it comes to teaching kids and getting kids to learn and getting kids to talk, you have to be thinking about how you are bridging their understanding and your interaction with them from concrete to abstract. And you can do that bridging both within a moment, and it's also done more over time. And as they grow older, their ability for abstract thinking increases, of course. However, younger kids, they can get a grasp of abstract concepts. And there are some abstract concepts that are very inherent to human nature, such as the belief in one God. That is a belief, that is an abstract belief that is inherent to human nature. The problem that kids have when it comes to talking at the dinner table about school, about their school day, is the question hits them as being something that is too abstract. And also, too, what they are learning at school will inevitably be something that is at a level of abstraction beyond what they are used to talking about. So it's something that it takes longer for their mind to think about and integrate. And this is a problem, especially in schools these days, because because what I'm teaching you here today, this is actually a problem that a lot of teachers have this problem these days as well, where they prompt the kids to do things that are too abstract or think things that are too abstract before they're really ready. Now, what does that mean? In the way we question kids, This right here, what you see on the screen, if you're just listening, looking on the screen, what did you learn at school today? This is probably the worst question that you can ask a kid at dinner if you're trying to get them to talk about their school day. Excuse me. But yet it's the question that's probably asked the most. Why is this probably the worst question? Well, just think about how much you have to integrate when you get asked this question as a kid. What did you learn in school today? Okay, well, first of all, how many different classes does the kid have? Math and reading, definitely, if they're in elementary school. Probably, science, social studies, or one of those. Gym or their special art class, whatever. 4 or 5, maybe 6 different classes they got to think through of what they learned. And then within all of those, the concepts of what they're learning are inherently abstract to what they normally and what they naturally think about. So you're asking them to integrate a whole lot. Then on top of that, when they ask this question, they have to immediately be concerned too about what your impression of the answer is going to be. So a lot of times, with a better bet on their side is to try to avoid answering it or answer it as little as possible for the sake of giving a bad impression about what they do answer. Because if they try to answer that, they probably think what they've learned about is something that you know about, and they don't want to say something that's wrong because they want to appear good to you and all that type of thing. So this question is just way too general and it's way too abstract to get a kid talking. And it's likely to make them nervous, likely to make them put up the spot. It's going to incentivize them to give as minimal an answer as possible. So what you have to do in order to get kids to start talking at the dinner table, you have to go more concrete first with the questions that you ask. And then through that, you at least get the habit ingrained in them, habituated to their minds, that they respond when you ask them a question because you're making it easier for them. So the first tool that you have in asking them is to make the question more concrete. The second tool that you have, which is very, very important, is limiting the answer choices within the question that you ask. So at the initial point of engagement in getting kids to talk about their day, you have to make it easy for them in order to do it. This is how the same thing works. This actually works both within a single lesson when you teach. It also works like over the course of a school year when you teach. When you start in the school year, you usually start with things that are fairly simple for the kids to grasp. And the big benefit you get out of that is you get the kids feeling a sense of success with what you're doing with them in the classroom. You want the same thing with your interaction with them at dinner, your interaction with them in general, especially when you're trying to find out about things that are going on outside the family or in their world outside of you. Because if you don't make it simple for them in the beginning, again, the habit you're going to ingrain to them is to answer with as little as possible. And then the standard that's going to be set is that when we try to interact as a family, what we do is shut down instead of interacting. Now, what does this actually look like? I'm going to go through it. This is what I'm going to do today is walk through an example of what this can actually look like at the dinner table. So let's say I ask, how was your school today? Now, it's okay to ask, how was school today? Just to generally set in the mind, okay, we're going to be talking about school. That's a general question. It's not different from what did you learn in school today, but it's okay to start a conversation with that. But how's the kid going to answer? How's the kid going to answer when you ask them this? You know how they're going to answer. They're going to say, good. Or if they don't really like school, they're going to say normal. Or if they really have an attitude about school, they're going to say boring. They're going to give some one-word answer. That's fine. For when we're just starting off with this question, that's fine. How's school today? Next question. Let's say we're talking to a 5-year-old here, okay, kindergarten. This is right at the beginning of the school year. So you could use the same process for ages older than that for sure. I say, how's school today? The kid says, good. I'm going to say, good. Did your teacher read to the class today? Now, we have to know a little bit ourselves. It's very predictable. Certainly, if you're in American school, I can talk a lot about what goes on in American schools. But, in elementary school, there's going to be some sort of reading every day. Okay. Younger ages, it's more likely to be the teacher reading to the students. The middle elementary grades, you're likely to have a mix of both. The upper elementary grades, the middle and upper elementary grades, there's probably going to be some devoted independent reading time for the kids in school. Sometimes might call it silent reading times. Sometimes I might call it read to self, something like this, 20, 30 minutes where the class is quiet and everyone's just reading their own book to themselves. Again, kindergarten, first grade, you're almost every day, you're going to have the teacher reading some book to the kid or something like this. If you've read to them at bedtime, that type of thing, before kindergarten, you will have helped attune your child to be more successful in that type of context in school when the teacher is reading to them. Any kindergarten teacher, they know the kids on the first day of school. They will know the kids whose parents read to them and whose parents do not at home, because the kids whose parents read to them, they won't have a hard time listening to story time during class. The kids whose parents don't read to them, they will have a hard time with that. And if you don't know, it's one of the most predictable factors of successful academic outcome as well as life outcome in children is how early their parents read to them in life. Okay, kids whose parents read to them early, by far and away, they are doing better in high school, doing better in college, all that type of stuff. All right. So this is a predictable thing that you know that you can ask about with an elementary age kid. You can get to what happened with reading that day. And now notice how the question is phrased. Did your teacher read to the class today? How do you answer that question? Yes or no? It's easy to answer. I'm not into what did you read today yet. I'm not into what was the book about that you read or something like that. I'm starting with easy to answer, yes or no, because I want to get the back and forth going. I want to get them successful with what we're talking about. Yes. Good. Did your teacher read to the class today? Yeah. Okay. Some boring answer, And by the dots, I'm illustrating moments of silence or pausing, because you can't expect a back and forth with a child, especially as you're trying to get to go more abstract, to go at the same clip that interacting with an adult does. Okay, so still at one word answers here is no problem because we're building up. Good. Did your teacher read to the class today? Yeah. Then I ask, so when she does that, do you guys sit on the floor or do you sit in your chairs? Now, why this question? Again, certainly in American elementary schools, it's common for the kids to sit on the floor for some parts of the day, sit in the chairs for others. Very common to be read to while they're sitting on the floor. But, how they are reading or whatever, that's not so much what's important here. But what's important here is I'm trying to bring the child's mind concretely into the context of what they did that day in class. I'm trying to get their mind to start visualizing it. I'm trying to get their mind slowly to start feeling that it's back in there. Because when I build up to the more abstract question, this type of front loading, this type of drawing them into that is going to help them be set up to answer that abstract question. And it's going to be getting the thoughts going in their own mind ahead of time and building up. All right. Simple question still. And notice how it's phrased. Now, another thing too, I'll show about what I've put here. I have the ellipses. I have the dot in the middle here of when I ask the question. Oh, so when she does that, do you guys sit on the floor or do you sit in their chairs? You want to use pausing when you're questioning kids, both after you ask the question completely to give them time to think about their answer, even if it's something simple, as well as within your question to get them to anticipate. Okay, it's a whole other thing you use pausing to. Giving the kids think time to formulate their answer and triggering anticipation in them of what you're going to say, which attunes their attention. The average wait time that a kid needs, the average kid needs in school for a question asked, a standard academic question asked that they know the answer to at their grade level is 3 seconds. Most teachers start to get anxious after they ask a question and it has not been answered in 1 second. There's some kids who are more advanced who will be able to answer most questions in 1 second. And teachers, what they do is they end up relying on those kids for all the back and forth. But 3 seconds is standard of what you want to allot a kid. There's not a problem with them answering until you've waited 3 seconds. If there's other factors at play that they have to integrate in their mind, it can be even longer than 3 seconds. For kids who are in a class where they're learning a second language, that is more like 7 to 10 seconds, which can feel like an eternity waiting that long after you've asked a question. But you want to do this with kids. You want to give them time to wait. You want to give them at least 3 seconds. If it's a little harder question, if not 7, 8, 9, 10 questions, before you try to prompt more for an answer. But again, within the question here, I've given 2 choices, so it's easy to answer. Now, if there's another choice, like, oh, we were standing up when this, okay, the kid will say that. But I've made the question easy to answer. Sitting down or on the floor? We're on the floor. Okay. Let's say they say that. Let me get this. Sorry, just give me a minute. After they say that, I'm going to say, oh, and today when she read to you, were you sitting close to the teacher or far away? Now, again, this is just the same thing as was before. Okay, I'm really trying to draw this out. I'm trying to get them to get their head into the context of the experience that they had that day while they were reading, with questions about concrete things, things they could see, things they could feel, things they can identify easily, concrete things. Now, the kid might answer, we were sitting in a circle. Now, notice here with this answer, if the kid gives me this answer, they haven't answered my question exactly, because I asked, are you sitting close or far away? However, this is actually a good answer here, because this shows that the kid is starting to think more about the context that they were in and starting to clarify some things to me. So it's maybe not so important here that I get the information about whether or not they were close or far away, unless I really want that information. But the answer here, it actually indicates to me that their mind is drawing back into the context a little more of what they're saying. Saying, okay, we were sitting into a circle. And again, I'm still limited with 2 choices in the questioning. Then I'm going to ask, oh, I see. And the book that she read to you, did you enjoy it? Or was it kind of boring? Okay, here I'm trying to bridge now from the concrete to the abstract. I'm still making it easy to answer by giving the 2 choices with the questioning. And you can give 3 if you want or whatever. But I'm bridging here from the concrete aspects of the situation to the more abstract aspect of the child's feelings towards it, because that's a level they can still feel that and they have a sense of that, but it's more abstract. So just trying to bridge the abstraction. And, of course, there's always this, every kid understands the level of abstraction of good, bad, or fun, boring. And they're always using that kind of calculus with what they go with. So you can get a sense of that. And even when you ask this question, depending on what you know about your kid, it's probably predictable what they said. If they're a boy, very, very likely they're going to say boring. Because boys do develop abstract thinking later than girls, and they're less verbal than girls on average, all that stuff. I'm imagining like I'm talking to a boy here. So the child's going to answer, kind of boring. All right. So still just simple answers. That's fine. But we're building. You say, oh, we're building. We're using the limited answer choices and the bridging from concrete to abstract. Now, I can say to that, in response to that, I can say, yeah, I remember being bored a lot in school too. Now, you can see visually here how I've broken this question up into 2 parts, and I actually have a statement before answering the question here. Something I want to illustrate to here is an important tool that you have with this type of thing as well. Now, I'm showing here how you build it up all the way to get to an abstract question. But a whole other tool that is important with getting kids to talk about their day is relating to their experience and also modeling for them talking about the school day yourself. Not so much talking about your day itself. You can talk about your day at work, but a lot of times that's hard for kids to grasp. And a lot of times kids might spend dinner listening to mom and dad talking about their day at work or whatever. And that's a whole thing they can't grasp mentally and all that type of stuff. So it's just like mom and dad are going blah, 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 or whatever, and they're sitting there, they're bored. But what you do want to model for kids is talking about your own reflections of being in school when you were their age as best you can. Now, what does that mean? That means one, you want to take some time in yourself, whatever age your kid is at, to actually reflect and dig into your long-term memory of what school was like when you were a kid. And I know, like, the automatic thing that people think adults think is, well, I don't really remember that or all that type of stuff. The first few things you will remember about your childhood experience are usually negative things. That's fine to go with it. But if you dig into your long-term memory, you can remember some specific things, and you can certainly remember like the general feel for it. A lot of kids, they're gonna experience boredom in school, and we are going to want to teach them how to discipline themselves and fight through that boredom. But that will begin with relating to that experience. A lot of kids experience in school the teacher talking, but they are thinking about something else entirely. We want to most of us had that experience when we were young. We want to relate to that experience. So sometimes, this continuum of concrete to abstract, again, you can build it up in the moment, like I'm showing you here, and I'm not done. I'm going to show you the progression of questioning that I go through here. But you also build it up over time. And this is the beautiful thing about consistency, okay? Because maybe I'm talking and I'm going to end my questioning with the kid right here, okay? Especially if I'm getting the sense that they really don't want to go into it or they're reticent to it. I'm definitely going to want to do what I'm talking about here more with older kids. I can transition at a certain point, especially those for you. You have kids, they're more like 9, 10, 11, 12, and you've not done this talking with them on a regular basis. So now you're in a place where you're trying to get a new habit in place. You still want to do the same thing I'm talking about. Start with the concrete questions. Just get them a little bit in the habit of they respond when you ask a question about school, and you ask them some questions that are answerable. Now, again, the older kids and 9, 10, 11, 12, they're starting to become more peer oriented, and they're thinking about what going on in school is going to be dominated by what is going on with their peers more than anything. There's going to be more reticence to have to break with them at that age. The way you do that is you talk about your own reflections in school. So in that way, you're modeling for them how to talk about school and the fact that it's an okay thing to do. And you, especially with kids, you want to talk about things that relate to insecurities and relate to the insecurities that you felt. Okay. Whether it was, not being good enough to understand what was going on, or you worried a lot about what kids thought of you or whatever. You want to talk about things that relate to insecurities. Why? Because your kids are going to have those insecurities. And actually, the insecurities of children, they mirror the insecurities of their parents very, very frequently, if not one parent than the other. And that is a whole thing to talk with your spouse about as well in your own conversations. Those are very good parenting conversations to have. Talk about the types of insecurities and the struggles you had as a child when your child was their age. Because if parents can understand one another's insecurities from when they were a child, you'll both have a much stronger understanding of your children's insecurities in general, because your kids will mirror it. When you can't understand your child's insecurities, it's because they have an insecurity from your spouse usually or their other parents. And even if people always ask, well, what if single parent? What if you're divorced? Situations are unfortunate. Try not to get divorced, number one. But number two, like, you still want to try to collaborate with the parent of your other kid and talk about these things. All right. So that's the third tool that you have in this. I didn't put it on the slides, but the third tool is you go to your own reflections. So if at this point, I can say, yeah, I remember, sitting in first grade and the teacher, reading some story about Three Little Pigs or something. And I was just thinking about video games the whole time or something like that. Actually, I will commonly I remember telling my kids about when I was in first grade. I remember walking into the classroom and feeling a sinking feeling in my stomach on the first day of school because I was nervous about what was going to happen, that type of thing. Try to think about some of those things, have those canned things, even if you just talk about it in a general way, because that is what you can transition to. And it's okay, even if we've only gotten to this point, if I'm just trying this out, or I've only gotten these little answers, okay, if that's more than I was getting before, that's fine. I can take that win one day. I can transition it to my own reflection. The kid might, kids are very interested to learn about what their parents were like when they were little. So like that might spark more conversation, or it's at least something that they absorb. And then you can go to more abstract questions later. But let's say that within this one session with the kid, okay, first or second day of kindergarten, whatever, I'm transitioning to I'm trying to get up to the more abstract questioning within it. And you see me doing that here with what's in blue. Okay. So I asked, I got into the physical context of what the reading was like on the floor, sitting in a circle and so forth, with again, binary questioning that is either yes or no, or it has this or that you can answer with. So it's easy for them to answer. I transition by getting to the emotion, but still with the binary options of choosing what it is. Now I'm getting to the more abstract question that has more answer choices. What's something from the book that you remember? So this is a good initial type of abstract question to step into. Okay, I've gotten their mind into the context of reading that book or having the teacher read it to them, and now just giving them the option of saying anything that they remember from it. So it's open, and they'll pick whatever. Okay, they're going to pick whatever with this. Now if they're real reticent, they're not good enough, they might say, I don't know. Okay. Now we've transitioned into the content of the book. So if that more open question of what do you remember, if they still can't handle that one, we go back to the same tactic of limiting the answer choices, but make it about the book now. And the content of the book is increasing the abstraction. So we can ask, well, think about it and tell me. And then after I say that, I pause, give them time to think about the question I'm going to ask. Was it about a person or an animal? And, it's so common, especially if your kid's educating in the West, this personification. And the kid shows, there's deep roots to this in European culture, why all these kids' stories and the Disney movies, they all involve animals that are like people, this type of thing. There's so many stories about animals and stuff. So if your kids are being educated in the Western world, or even if you're in the developing world, and they're using a curriculum or what they think is a curriculum from the Western world, in the early childhood grades, good chance they're being read stories where there's an animal. So this is an easy question to ask, But again, just something about the book, the concrete context of the book, that you give them two choices to answer with. And the child says, "Oh, a person." Give me the answer. MashaAllah. Okay. Oh, I see. Now, same thing, because he struggled with just recollecting something. So again, I go to still drawing things out with the binary question. Oh, I see. Was it a boy or a girl? A girl. And what's something you remember about the girl? So now I go back to the remembered question, but I've drawn the mind into something more specific within the context of the book. She had to bring something to her grandmother, but her grandmother was a wolf. Okay. And now, again, after this long drawing out with this simple questioning of getting the kid's mind through concrete questioning into a specific context of what they're doing, I'm limiting all the different things that they have to integrate. And the questioning, the building up the question like this, it gives their mind time to process, and their mind time to recollect, this type of thing. Okay. Now, again, we don't know how this will go, but if I continue with this binary question, even if the kid says, I say, what's something to remember about the girl, they still won't say anything, which is unlikely at this point, to be honest. But if they still say, oh, I don't know. Okay. I can go back, did they do something scary, or did they do something fun? Or, I can continue with that as I like. Or, again, I can transition away from it and go to talking about a story I've read, or talking about my own experience, something I remember from kindergarten. And then I'll save getting more abstract till later. Now, if I do that too, I can say to them after I'm done talking about myself, I can say to the child, Junior, he's asking you about reading today. I like hearing about what you do in school. So tomorrow, when you're reading today, you didn't know, you weren't able to remember anything to tell me about the book, or you weren't able to tell me anything about the character in the book. So when you go to school tomorrow, when you're listening to the teacher read, I really want you to think of something that you're going to remember. And then tomorrow you can come back and ask me about it, or this type of thing. Okay. So you can also do that. You can set a task for them, and then building up the level of abstraction, it gets transferred to the next day. And this is the beauty of consistency, because when we have that consistent time with the kids, we can build things up over time like that. Now, if Junior answers me, she had to bring something to her grandmother, but her grandmother was a wolf. This is what story? This is Little Red Riding Hood, which still today is very common, a very common story to be read, versions of it, in one version or another of it, in kindergarten, in American schools, I'm sure in British schools as well, because they teach a whole lot of safety lessons at the beginning of the school year, really with any grade, but certainly with kindergarten. And Little Red Riding Hood has a specific lesson about it. What's the specific lesson about it? What's the specific lesson about Little Red Riding Hood? The specific lesson of Little Red Riding Hood is to not talk to strangers, because she goes to bring food, whatever, to her grandmother or whatever. The grandmother is actually a wolf or whatever. So, and even though she doesn't recognize the wolf as her grandmother, she talks to her, whatever. They use that story to teach not to talk to strangers or whatever. Now, if I get to this point, I can draw more things out. Okay, we can talk about what happened in the story, whatever. If it's a story, I know that's good. I can build on it. If it's not, I'll try to draw out whatever if I can. And I'm going to build up to the more abstract question of, so what do you think is the lesson your teacher wants you to learn from this story once I've gotten out of it? Now, again, a lot of times kids won't fully get the lesson. So when we draw a lot of things out with them, we can help mold the lesson for them, and that's going to help their engagement in school. I highlight, too, asking the question, what do you think is the lesson your teacher wants you to learn from this story? Sometimes because there could be a gap between the lesson that we want our kids to be learning and the exact lesson that the school is teaching them. That is actually fairly common, especially if our kids are going in the Western world. Now, that might happen in extreme ways. For example, maybe nowadays they read Little Red Riding Hood, and the lesson is that some wolves like to dress up as grandmas, and it's okay if someone wants to dress up as a grandma, even if they're a boy wolf or something like that. Who knows what direction they will take it in? That could happen. I'm not saying that's what happens typically. It's not what happens typically. Some places it does happen, more likely if you're in California versus not. But again, you want to try to draw this out, and you want to get a sense of how well your child is attuned to what their teacher is teaching. So you want to frame the question that way. Now, once you get that lesson out, you can attune it to how you want it. Or if they don't really know, then you can help frame the lesson that they should take out of it, or this type of thing. And again, as Muslims, a lot of times nowadays, the lessons that kids get out of things is, the lesson that the West just falls back on teaching them is, individualism or individual subjectivity or be yourself, that type of thing. That's certainly the lesson they get out of movies and TV shows all the time. And you can use the same process for asking them about those types of things, and then you can fine tune it after they get out of it and say, well, yeah, that's true. But also we have to remember as Muslims, maybe we can pursue our desires to some degree, but we also regulate that or subordinate that. We also consider what Allah says in his book and this type of thing. And, you can always bring that connection from whatever they're learning to how it relates to Islam, how it relates to being Muslim and this type of thing. Okay. Concrete to building to abstract. Those are the two big things to know as far as getting a child to talk at the dinner table. Make the question concrete, limit the answer choices. Also, to model for yourself talking about your own memories in school, so it becomes relatable, and focus that modeling on talking about insecurities that you experienced. Why? Because that way they don't feel isolated with their own insecurities anymore. And that is what will open them up to talking to you about insecurities that they do have over time. And this continuum from being concrete to abstract, it's something that you have to keep in mind at all times. And your adult mind, if you're used to only, by the time we have children, we're used to just operating with adults and discussing with adults more. And, adults can very fluidly talk about abstract things, and making that connection of what connects with a child is something that we need to work on. It's often beneficial to think about talking with a child imagine you're talking to a child who's a little younger. I actually find that helps quite a bit. And I've told you, it benefited me a lot in my teaching experience. I teach 11th grade now. My first year teaching, I taught first grade and then fourth grade and then middle and high school. So that buildup helped me quite a bit. And, I found teaching high school, it was beneficial to just think of them like they were elementary school students, even though there was some difference. So I'm not going to go too long today, brothers and sisters. Jazakumullah khairan for those of you who are here. Inshallah, I will be back on. We'll continue on Saturday at 9 a.m. We'll get into how you set kids up to do chores around the house. Inshallah, I will be getting some supplemental videos out. I have some other videos I know people like breaking down other types of stuff. I'll do some other breakdowns of different things. Inshallah, please share the course. Please share it with people. Okay, parenting skills Muslims need. Follow me on Instagram, abrahameducation.com. Again, brothers and sisters, there's no way that people are going to learn this stuff without you sharing it. And most of you can see the importance of it. We'll take one question here. In my society as a child, I remember most of the times we hated school due to fear. As a grown up in the same environment, how can you change this feeling as a child? All right, really good question. Actually, sorry, something I forgot to acknowledge. I'm talking about a very Americanized context of sitting at the dinner table. And I know that culturally, there's some places where, the kids don't talk at the dinner table or whatever. I can't tell you all what to do culturally. I know this is not answering the question directly. We'll get to that. But I know there's some people following who are from a culture where the kids don't talk at the dinner table. You have to decide for yourselves how you do that. But you're finding in your experience raising these kids that there's all kinds of cultural things that are going by the wayside now. And almost the more rigid you are with the cultural things, the more the kids want to push back against it. So if you grew up where you were just silent at the dinner table or whatever, I understand that maybe it's hard for you to start doing that or do something different with your kids, but you really might think twice about this. Open up that conversation with your spouse, open up with the kids themselves, because your kids are going to grow up more exposed than you are. So you need to have this connection with them. This is how you begin setting the tone with them, that you are a go-to place for learning from them. You are a go-to place with their insecurities. You're a go-to place with their fears and all that type of thing. This is how it starts. You want to start it from the earliest of ages, especially if they're going to school outside the home. But you want to do this process, even if you homeschool kids, you can do this related to things that they watch on TV or other interactions they have with neighborhood kids or whatever. Ben Jamil says, my society as a child, I remember most of the times we hated school due to fear, but now as a grown up in the same environment, how can you change this feeling in a child? Look, sister, I would say you're not likely to change that feeling. A lot of kids have fear over school. It's natural to fear over school. So overcoming fear is a process that takes over time. Fear is rooted in not knowing and insecurities. So when you get these conversations going with kids at the dinner table or at reading time before bed or whatever, again, this is why I talk about modeling for yourself, talking about insecurities, because you want the kid to learn to come out with it themselves. And then when they come out with it themselves, you teach them the lesson that you eventually learned in life to get over that insecurity, or how you're still working on it today. And teaching that lesson one time will not get them to get over it right then, but consistent messaging over time is what causes kids to develop the way we want them to. Also too, a big thing with fear, a big thing you do when talking to kids about school, you get them to appreciate the perspective of the adult. Okay. So this is something, we struggle. I've said this before. We struggle as adults to appreciate the perspective of kids because we haven't been kids in a long time. But it's even harder for kids to appreciate the perspective of adults because they have never been adults in their life. So they literally have no idea. And as I've talked about in the previous lessons with the nonverbal things, very often it's natural for kids with their sensitivities to interpret nonverbal communication from adults in a more harsh way than adults might mean to put out. And then sometimes adults are, certain cultures, they're putting out more harsh nonverbals than they even authentically feel like putting out, but they think that's effective or something like this. when all it does is create this fear that you're talking about in kids. So you want to talk to them about what adults do in the perspective of adults. I used the example today of this type of questioning relating to reading, because reading is something that always comes up in elementary school. You can do the same thing, but the topic you're trying to get to is the teacher and the teacher's character. You start asking about very concrete things relating to the teacher. What do they look like? What clothes are they wearing today? Or this type of thing. Do they talk loud? Do they talk soft? Okay. How do you feel? How does the teacher gather the class? How does the teacher move you from one activity to another? Okay, transitions are a big thing in schools. Teachers have different methods of what they will do with them. Some are better than others, but they're if you're transitioning the class from going from this room to that room, or from sitting down to standing up, or I'm sorry, sitting down to sitting on the floor, sitting on the chair, sitting on the floor. There's a teacher who can have a fluid process for doing that, or a teacher who will yell the kids into doing it or whatever. You try to get to how do you feel when the teacher teaches? How do you feel when the teacher gives you direction? That type of stuff, to get a feeling for the kid's sentiment for the teacher, and then if the kid does have feelings and thoughts about the teacher, they'll start to open up with it. And if some of these, so if they're having fear related to their interaction with adults, you can start to find out about that, and then you give them perspective of the adult. A lot of times, I know it seems like the teacher is being really loud, they're being really mean, but you have to remember they're trying to control 25 kids at the same time, and that's not something that's easy. This type of thing, you could, have them empathize with the teacher's stress or whatever. This type of thing. If the teacher really is not good, then it's maybe something that you can help the kid address or understand more, that type of thing. So that is this whole process of questioning, going from concrete to abstract. Again, I modeled it with reading today, but you can do other things. In younger elementary school, I would say you want to do that with what I'm talking about with the teacher. As they get older, you want to do that more and more with the other kids. You want to start sprinkling that in there as they get to 7, 8, 9. And when they get to 9, 10, they're really going to start having a sense of other kids more, and their mind will start to be more dominated by what other kids are doing versus what the adult is doing in the room. And the same type of question. So I hope that answers for the sister. Jazakumullah khairan to everyone who is here. Barakallahu fikum. I hope everyone had an Eid Mubarak. Thank you for taking the time for being on this live stream during it. Again, Saturday, 9 a.m. We'll be back at it. Anything good that I said comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his ni'mah upon us. Anything wrong that I said comes from the evils and deficiencies within myself and my own soul. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and I seek forgiveness and make repentance to him alone.